does this actually look like in practice when you test whether adaptation pays? In cities like Houston, flooding isn't a one-off event. For many communities, it's something they've experienced multiple times, impacting their homes, insurance, and long-term property value. So then the question becomes, how do you decide what to do next?
This is why we take Houston as a good example for a use case. We looked at 100 single-family homes in Maryland, a neighborhood that has experienced repeated flooding. And instead of just mapping the risk, we asked a different question. Which adaptation options actually makes economic sense?
And that's where the practical value comes in. Many communities, they already know that they're exposed. The real question is, what are the levers that they can pull? Where does it make sense to invest in protection? Where should we adapt and redesign? And where do we need to start planning for whether it's transition or relocation? It's about giving cities actionable choices and understanding the trade-offs, costs, and outcomes tied to each of those paths.
In this case, the analysis focused on homes with similar characteristics so that the difference in outcomes reflected the hazard more clearly. We looked at how flood risk varied across the neighborhood, especially around the bayous and drainage channels, and then assessed loss and adaptation performance across those locations.
So this is not a generic flood bad, resilience good story, but it's a structured comparison?
That's exactly right. We tested adaptation options like dry flood proofing and compared the cost of those interventions against the losses they could avoid. In the case of dry flood proofing, that produced a positive ROI for 52% of the locations that we analyzed. So that doesn't mean that every property needs the same intervention. It means you can start to see with much more confidence where adaptation already has a credible economic case.
And that is the kind of insight that decision makers really need, because it turns a broad risk story into a much sharper planning conversation. Where do we act first? What type of interventions perform best? And where do we need to honestly look at it taking a different approach?
And that's the shift. It also shows something important. Adaptation is local. Even within one neighborhood, flood behavior and economic outcomes can vary a lot. So the goal isn't a one-size-fits-all answer. It's a better way to prioritize.
And that's why I think this example matters beyond Houston. Adaptation needs to move beyond just broad risk awareness towards targeted, evidence-based decisions. And while that changes from scenario to scenario, we do have a really strong framework and toolkit of intelligent solutions that can help provide some structure with that right advisory lens. And we'll uncover this in our next episode. And that's where the real takeaway from this Houston example is fairly simple. The cost of adaptation may still feel uncertain, but the investment plan doesn't have to be. The broader lesson is that when you can quantify avoided losses and compare them to intervention costs, adaptation moves much closer to an investment plan, not just a resilience aspiration. And that's the shift that we're trying to make, from hazard awareness to option comparison to investable decisions.
And that's where better data, better economics, and better delivery come together.